All right, folks. So welcome to episode 11 of the Cinchi Learning Series. Today, we are covering off real revenue intelligence and how to apply collaborative intelligence, i.e. real intelligence in your sales organization. Today, our guests of the show are Dan Demers, who is our CEO and the co-founder of Cinchi, as well as Phil Kazuba. Phil is our Chief Sales Officer here at Cinchi. He has led sales and marketing teams across a series of Canadian startups for the last 30 years. With a love for building and defining go-to-market strategies, Phil enjoys the challenge of aligning products and services to the needs of buyers to create a predictable revenue capability for early-stage companies. Over his career, he's used a host of tools, including Salesforce, Oracle, and Marketo, and other business intelligence tools to be even more predictive on his sales outcomes. All right, over to you, Dan.
Thanks, Joanne. And today's topic is the realization of intelligence and applying that to revenue, to basically grow sales. We're not talking about artificial, we're talking about genuine intelligence by connecting the apps together to form an intelligent ecosystem. And Phil's going to walk us through how he is using a data fabric to enable this outcome. But before I hand it back to, or hand it over to him, just a reminder of the maturity scale that you can evaluate individual solutions for. And what you're going to see today is actually a hybrid, where there's going to be some solutions at different levels, but all working together in harmony. But that level 0 is really the level that everyone starts at, where you have traditional applications, not one, but hundreds, where each application has more or less the same components, regardless of if it's bought or built, if it's in the cloud or on-prem. It has a user interface, it has a system interface through APIs, it does some automation, it has some controls, it needs to store data, and it needs to do integration. Level 1 is where you take that existing application and you make it smarter by plugging it into a data fabric to avoid point-to-point integration, and then benefit from plasticity, which we've covered in a previous session, which means that schema can evolve and the application can get more intelligent as a result and doesn't break, which is pretty cool. So that's at that level 1. Level 2 is really where you're building new. So you're going to see some level 2s today, as well as some level 1s all working together. And the difference here is a level 2 is an experience that doesn't manage data in a silo. The data is born on the data fabric. It's autonomous data. It's appless data. And then level 3 is where you're leveraging a metadata-driven experience. And most of what you'll see today is actually at that level 3 for how we use a data fabric to run our business. So with that said, I'm going to hand it over to Phil.
Awesome. It's funny, just a couple of days ago, one of the leading analysts came out with this a survey, and it was mind-boggling to me. Like literally 5 years from now, they're still saying 90% of organizations will not be using data, will not use analytics in a meaningful way to drive their revenue and drive the performance of their team. And it's just astounding. Like it's hard to imagine. But I think the reality of it is it's because they're not connecting and using data live and interactively. Certainly not the way we're doing it. Like we're doing some really interesting things here at Cinchi, but we're doing it right from the granular level of how our sales teams and our business development teams interact with the data, all the way up to the summarized level of how we share that information to potentially a board member or other executives on the team. And so to me, when I saw this, it just jumped out to me that we have a long way to go. And I'm confident that the data fabrics and what we're doing at Cinchi is definitely one of the paths to get there. So that all being said, let me dive into a little bit of background information about how we've set up our revenue system here at Cinchi. And absolutely, it's mostly focused on Cinchi and running on Cinchi, the product. So the whole right-hand side of it is around autonomous data. So our CRM, our marketing campaigns, our marketing automation, even Cinchi.tv that Dan and Joanne were talking about before, are all actually built right on top of Cinchi. But we've also enhanced that by connecting to some third-party applications and some third-party data that we have available. A simple example of that is we use Copper to connect to G Suite. So we track all of our incoming emails, our calendar invites, and we don't do it inside the application. What we do is we use that to actually make that information available to the Cinchi CRM application or into our leads and pipeline information. We also connect to third-party data like Full Contact that tells us about the buyer. We connect to Outreach, we connect to Gong. So we've really built out our data fabric comprising of autonomous data that we have inside of Cinchi and third-party data sets so that we have our brain version of what we're doing from a revenue intelligence perspective. It's really quite powerful. It's amazing to see in action. So speaking of seeing it in action, What I thought I would do is walk through 4 different steps of what we're doing from a revenue intelligence perspective. First, give you a sense of our network. Finally, show you how we're using the data and information we have available to drive quality. Dan says this all the time, the best disinfectant is sunlight. Well, we put a lot of sunlight on all of the data that we have inside of our marketing team's efforts, our sales team's efforts, because obviously that data drives a lot of the predictive models that we're going to talk about, or the funnels, because we want to make sure quality is there. I'm then going to show you how we built out our predictive model. And I'll tell you right up front, Joanne mentioned this when she said I've been doing this for 30 years, which I'm sure you can tell from my gray hair, but I would have literally bought a third-party product to do some of the things that we're just doing right inside of Cinchi. So I would have spent more money, spent more time, probably not got it right the first couple of times. We're actually doing it right in the product. So I'm going to show you how we do that, how we make that happen. And then finally, I want to show you the funnel, and then I'm going to hand it back to Dan to actually show conversational intelligence and some recent work that we've been doing on that front. So let me start right at the first bit. I'm going to start with just showing you our revenue network. Let me move a couple of things out of the way here. If you've been to a learning series episode before, you'll know that this is actually the Cinchi brain, right? This is all of our data, all of our insights, all of the information about how we run our business. It's completely we can navigate it from here. Let me first start by just showing you the marketing domain and all of the information that we have available in marketing. So we have everything from attribution targets to the actual content library. We have the lead sources here. And as you can see, I'm just navigating the network itself, and I'm doing it based on the privilege and rights that I have. In this particular case, I can see quite a bit of the information, but we have all of that information readily available, completely connected to the sales data, to the other pieces of information that we use to drive our business. I'm going to jump from there into the actual sales domain. And just give 1 second here for it to catch up. And you can see here, like we have all of the different information in the sales domain from this perspective. Let me just break that out for you a little bit here. We have everything from the opportunities and pipeline work that we're doing across our opportunities, our pipeline stages. We have our price list information in here. We're really big believers in the idea of proof of values, and we track all that information very closely with our customers. So we track that very closely here. But to give you a sense of it, I'm going to dive right into our prospects and leads table. I can navigate it here, like once I've selected it. I'm going to actually open it up, but just move that out of the way. And I'm going to give you a detailed view of our actual prospects and leads and how our team works on it. I'm going to focus in on one of the ones that we had here. I set up a demo one just so that we're not disclosing confidential information. I'm going to jump right into that one. And what it allows me or anybody on the team to do is to actually see a particular lead and opportunity. It's got all of the background information, so I can navigate my way through this. I can see that it's currently at a sales lead stage in our pipeline. The deal is likely to convert to the next stage. I can see information about the individual. I can also see next actions and action items from there. And if I ever want to, I can actually look at the history by just going back into that collaboration log, and I can see all of the changes that have happened. And as I mentioned, we don't just do everything on Cinchi itself. We have it connected to other sources like Hopper, where we're connecting for Gmail. We have Skynet, which is basically augmenting it with additional information for the team. We have Outreach, which is doing, basically it's an email broadcast system that we have. But I can also see the changes that were made by Dan or by other people like myself. And I can see that it was originally brought in as a prospect. It got promoted to a sales lead. It became a more likely deal to convert, and then ultimately became a qualified lead that the team's working on. And I can see all that history and all that information as an individual looking at the leads and opportunities in our pipeline. This view happens to be a tabular view of it. A lot of our sales team like to actually work in the form view, and it allows them to navigate the exact same information, but done dynamically through a data form that we built. Again, here you can see the summary level information. You can see additional information about the customer use cases, the next actions and how that all comes together. You can see that as well. I mentioned that we're using full contact to bring in some personality information. So when we first engage with the client, we want to make sure that we understand what motivates them, what's the best way to interact with them, how they like to be, how they like to interact with people. So we can see all of that information from one summarized view. I can see all the interactions that have happened. So this particular lead was first contacted on September 1st. It's been open for 79 days. We've had 5 interactions. And I also can see that the last contact was on November the 18th, so very recently. Again, it's just giving the team a really quick summarized view of leads and opportunities as they come into our pipeline. And you can look at that very quickly, and it provides great information for the team to work from overall. So that's how generally the team works from it. The one thing I'm going to note here is you'll notice that some of these fields are actually color coded, right? So green obviously indicating a positive status. Red's actually showing that maybe there's something behind. So this is an action date that was actually yesterday. And one of the things that we've done to make sure that we put a spotlight on data quality is we've introduced this idea of data quality signatures. And let me just show you a summarized view of those data quality signatures. And what we're basically doing is scanning all of the opportunities, all of the leads, all of the activities that the team has committed to do and deliver on, and looking at it and finding out if there's any potential areas where we're behind. So in this particular case, you can see that, well, actually, I've had quite a few come in recently. So I think what happened is probably there's a batch of new leads and prospects that were just added that I need to go in and do some cleanup. But it allows me to see a quick summarized view of that information. And then based on that, I can dive in and actually act on it right within the table itself from there. So yeah, you can see that's exactly what's happening, where it's provided a summarized view of it. So we use these data quality signatures as a method to make sure that we have that spotlight on data quality all the time across the entire team.
Hey, Phil, there's a question here in the chat. So the question is, can a 3P system like Salesforce be represented like this and managed like this alongside a 1P system? Or is the migration from Salesforce to Sinchi the first step?
Yeah, and actually, let me go back to this chart here just to give you a sample of, in this case, we connected to other third-party systems, but this could have easily been Salesforce. Like we could have connected to Salesforce as a data source that we're going to augment in through Sinchi. And so you don't need to get rid of Salesforce. You don't need to replace it. I mean, it makes no sense to do that, right? You've already made that investment. But if you wanted to enhance it and continue to expand the use of it, you could, once you make the connection once to Sinchi, we would make all that data and information available. I'm not sure, Dan, if you were going to add anything there.
Yeah, hey, Phil, this is Chris Stevens. That was my question. I didn't want to interrupt you. So I just paraphrasing what I heard to confirm. So Salesforce may well be our operational kind of sales management system, CRM, and so on. But the use case, and I'm at Zendesk, the use case that we have, is probably fairly well represented by your diagram there, right?
Right. And
we're already ingesting Salesforce data into GCP, for other purposes, including enrichment and reporting and so on. So right. It's essentially the same thing, in the sense that I'm continuing to ingest that data from that operational system, right?
Correct. Yes. And with Salesforce and other systems, it can be completely bi-directional as well, right? So that we can not only take the data and information that you have in Salesforce, but we can augment it with other information that we're gathering. And Dan, I'm wondering if this might, just for Chris's question, is this a good place to maybe show the Salesforce integration? I don't know if I have it up and running on mine. Would you mind showing that?
Yeah, we did cover that in a past session in more depth.
Yeah, you don't have to dig back into that. I get it. So then I could, but as I'm creating intelligence in Sinchi, I could also push that back in to Salesforce for actionability by the sales team.
Yeah. So Chris, one of the past episodes is called Application Augmentation. We show that exact scenario. So
okay,
great. It shows the bidirectional connectivity into Salesforce, where we're taking an email address and then sending back to Salesforce the person's personality. And it explains how that, because that will sound like magic, but it explains how that's actually very easy to do. But you've got it. Sinchi is the intelligence layer there, and Salesforce, like any other what would traditionally be a siloed application, becomes an endpoint that both benefits from the intelligence and contributes to the intelligence.
Great. And by the way, hey Dan, we talked once before a couple months ago in my previous.
Awesome. Sorry, Joanne, were you saying something there?
No, sorry. I'm just going to send the link directly over to Chris and anybody else that wants to watch the application augmentation.
Okay, perfect. Awesome. So again, like from a lead or an opportunity level, our team works either in this tabular form or a form view, but we also provide those consolidated views, like where we're looking at data quality and that stuff. So that's just a quick example of how we've used it from that perspective. What I thought I would do from here is go from the data quality side is to actually talk about our predictive revenue model and what we've built there. And again, this is an example, like in the last couple of companies I've been with, we would have literally gone out and bought a product like Insight Squared We would have taken the time to plug it into Salesforce. It probably would have taken weeks to make that happen. And then we would have worked through the data quality problems, which is naturally going to happen. We've actually built this right from the ground up. And I'm proud to say, like, I think, Dan, you and I built this over a couple of hour window where we started to think about what we wanted. Probably spent most of the time trying to figure out what the right model was versus actually building. But we've been able to actually use that very dynamically in the way that we provide information for our board, but also how the team looks at their deals and how they're progressing. So let me just jump right into that level of view for you. So the predictive model for us, first of all, let me give you a little background here. We primarily go after three different company segments. The first one is what we would call mid-sized enterprise accounts. The second one is our enterprise customers, and the final one would be SMB accounts. And when we look at our predictive model, we break down across those three segments, and then we also break down further by the different types of deals we do. So obviously it takes a little longer to land your first deal versus expanding an existing deal. So we want to be able to look at that and see exactly what our predictive model is for each of the different types and segments of customers that we're pursuing. I'll just focus in on the first one here, which is our MSC land deal. From a pipeline perspective, we have 7 different stages in our pipeline. And what we would do is we literally track every movement of every lead and every opportunity to build out our advancement percentage and our close won percentage. So I'll give you a simple example. It becomes an actual opportunity in our world when it hits the POV scoping phase. We're big believers in proving the value and working closely with our customers to do that. So it's a really significant phase for us. But when we get a prospect or lead to a POV scoping stage, we're seeing 66% of those advance and 46 of them actually convert and become customers. So the simple calculation there is basically 1 out of every 2 POV scoping opportunities that we work on will ultimately become a customer. And we literally track this information. It's driven off of live data right out of our leads and prospects table and off of our conversions. And then we continually use that. And I'll give you a quick example of that at the board level and how we provide a summarized view of our pipeline, not just the current pipeline, what's converted, but also the future view of that pipeline itself. Sorry, I'm going to zoom in there. Hopefully that's viewable on my screen. So just from left to right, it's our fiscal period. What's our approved budget from a fiscal perspective? What did we present during our last meeting? We also provide a summarized view of a total pipeline that we have that the team's actively working on. And then we use our predictive model to indicate what a future projection is for that potential quarter or timeframe that we're looking at. I'm just going to drill right into this. And this is a powerful capability. I wouldn't be doing this with a third-party product where I'm going from a high-level summary view right down to this level of detail. But we are able to do that, obviously, through the power of the data fabric. And what you're seeing here is a summarized view of the pipeline for fiscal Q2. It starts off with the opportunities that we have as current opportunities today at the different stages that you can see. So we've got this one deal is at closing stage. What I love about this is it tells me that 25 of the 27 steps that we go through in closing a deal have been successfully completed. So I can quickly tell how far the team's been able to move that deal forward. I can see the same thing with POV execution, POV scoping. I can get right down to granular level details, including, if you remember Bart, he actually worked for ABC Inc. I can go right back to that individual field and see exactly what's happening to that particular opportunity, that particular lead we're working on. And again, it's all condensed and consolidated through that summarized view that, in this case, we're providing to the board, but it could be provided to other people in the organization as well.
Actually, Phil, could you go back to the board report just for 1 second?
Absolutely.
Actually, here's perfect. So the predicted ARR column side by side with the best case ARR, that is really the application of that predictive model that Phil covered earlier. So the way to think of it is it's giving a real-time view of where we are in the funnel, stage by stage, segment by segment, land versus expand, and then it's applying that in real time. So if a deal were to advance from stage 1 to stage 2 right here, right now, then the conversion rates would adjust accordingly, and the predictions for all other deals that are in that same stage that match those characteristics would also update in real time. So with more data behind, the more accurate this becomes. So what we're seeing is on a kind of quarter-to-quarter basis, even month-to-month, the predicted numbers are becoming more accurate versus where we ultimately land at the end of the quarter, which is very powerful. It's trending in the right direction. It's never going to be exactly right, but the fact that it's real time, there's no separate after the fact intelligence. This is real time operational intelligence.
Yeah. And one of the things that we regularly do with the board is we literally jump right into these reports and show it live. Probably scares the sales team a little bit because they got to make sure the data is all up to date. But it's so powerful because they get to see it. They understand exactly what's going on. There's nothing hidden, right? We're completely transparent with all that information. And it's really easy for them to get a summarized view of what's going on overall. So why don't I pause there and just see if there's any questions at all? Okay, awesome. So we've kind of talked to the predictive model and how we've built that and how we're using it against live, both leads data and opportunities data. I quickly showed you a summarized view of that funnel and how we're using that to generate our board level reporting and pipeline information. And then why don't I hand it over to Dan and he'll walk through the conversational intelligence component.
All right, cool. So hopefully you now can see my screen again. So yeah, going to cover conversational intelligence. It's something that we actually just configured over the past couple of days. So we'll show you what was done over the course of, I'd say, well under 5 hours of net effort. So we were already using technology from a company called Gong, which is pretty powerful. It records conversations and does transcriptions and basically makes those files available for us. But we wanted to connect that into the fabric. We don't want that to be a data silo. So when Phil was looking at the one kind of fake lead that we have in just for the purposes of this demo, Bart here, you may have noticed that there's this conversations tab here. And if I click on that, you can see that there is a conversation, and I can see who was part of this conversation, including Bart. You can see the subject was bananas, so this was a fake call, whereas all the other calls are all real. But for the purposes of this demo, we, again, didn't want to show a real customer call. But you can see that I can open up the call. I can actually listen to the call. If I open up the call, I can see all the information about that, when it was, who owns the call. So in this case, Phil shared it with me, but he owns it. It was his call. I can see who was participating on that. I can listen to it, and I can even see the transcript of the actual call. And this node that you're seeing is actually just a node on the fabric. So if I go to our overall fabric, you can see that there's conversational intelligence. Like if I went back a couple of days, you'll see it didn't exist because we just added it. And there you can see conversations, and you can see conversation has links to a lead as an example, because you want to have the conversations in context. Conversations can be tagged, and conversations have participants and can be owned by an employee. So that's really the conversation node, which I'm showing you here. But what I'll do is I'll show you the sample call. So now I'm actually in Gong. It's a really cool technology. And I'm going to play the conversation just so you can see what's happening.
Hey, everyone, it's Chris.
So you'll hear voices, Joanne and Phil and myself on this. And obviously this is a fake conversation, but I'm going to play this just in the background.
You all here for better note-taking, follow-up, and training purposes.
Hey, this is Joanne. Who else do we have on the call today?
You got Phil.
And hey, this is Dan. And by the way, I just want to share with you that I really like bananas.
You know what I like? We've been having a lot of fun lately talking about finding the ideal customer, and sometimes we like to refer to.
So you see what's happening is it's transcribing it into text. That's what Gong does. But what we've done is we've pulled that into our fabric using a connector. This was literally hours of work. And this is one conversation that I'm seeing, but I can go back and I can look at all my conversations, including the one that I just showed you, which is shared here. And I can then associate that to a lead. So now that I have the conversations as well as the text, if I wanted to do a search, I can register a keyword. So let's say I want to look for the word bananas. So we said that very deliberately. So if I do bananas, and then I'm going to do green bananas as a second word, bananas, and I'm going to give these a score. So I'm going to say a banana is worth 10, green banana is worth 20, and let's just say, I don't know, expensive is worth -10. So these are going to factor into the sentiment of the caller and of the overall call. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to run a query that we built, which basically will scan the contents of everything. And you can see right now I only have these 2 probes, and it's pulled in the one conversation. But let's do a quick summary of this. So I'm going to do a pivot, and I'm going to do a sum of the sentiment, and I'm going to group that by the call. And I want to bring the probe down into here, and I'm going to filter it down just for that one call that we were looking at, that fake call that we did. And I'm going to render that as a chart. So what I can see is that both bananas and green bananas was said. But if I wanted to change this probe and say green bananas is now worth, I don't know, -5. If I come back and just refresh this, so if I go back to the grid, you can see now it's -5. And if I go back to the pivot, you see now the net sentiment is showing 10 positive and then 5 negative. So it's giving you that aggregate view. So you can see it's 5 is the total net summary. And I can compare this against other calls within the same lead, across leads, and do some really interesting analysis that we're just getting started because we literally enabled this integration over the past 48 hours with about 5 hours of effort. But we're excited to put it to work. So this is just an example of adding another node to the fabric where it is combining that intelligence. Now we know their personality, we know the sentiment of the calls, we know what was said. So as we add more and more apps to it that are each contributing intelligence and benefiting from intelligence, that is what we call that collaborative intelligence.
Yeah. And it's like that example is a great one from an analytics perspective. But one of the things we've talked about is also taking things like what's next action item, or an action item that someone talks about in a conversation, and automatically populating the action items in the table, right? So saving the sales team time from recording it, but also just making sure we don't miss anything. And that when we make a commitment to a client or a prospect, that we follow through on it. So the possibilities are absolutely endless. It's really exciting to see how we could take that data and information from the Gong recording and do something meaningful with it. So just as a quick summary, I know we're just at the top of the hour already. From a couple of thoughts, or 3 thoughts for you. One is application augmentation. So I know that Chris had that conversation before, but absolutely Data Fabric can enable that, can empower it. Through that bi-directional update, you can not only take information from those legacy applications, you can actually augment and enhance that data in there in those applications as well. You continue to drive better control and access to the data that you have in your organization. We showed you that network view and the fact that I see certain things versus the way Dan would see it, but allowing that control and allowing the data to be available to be used proactively, but still within the privacy and securities that matter on that side. And then of course, the endless possibilities. I just love that integration with the Gong recordings. And I can think of about 20 different ways that we could leverage that to help the team be way, way more efficient.
Great. So next week, we're going to be covering a more technical view of the design patterns when you're thinking of applying a data-centric architecture. So when you think of the many ways that you can apply a data fabric, like you've just seen just an example in the context of revenue, in the context of app augmentation, but there are many other patterns. So we're going to zoom out a little bit and show really how to leverage it from an architectural perspective when you're evaluating your future projects on where there could be alignment and acceleration using this exciting data fabric paradigm.